Hello, welcome to a new calculator tutorial for the TI-84 Plus. Today, we'll be discussing how to use and manipulate lists in your calculator, as well as a few useful tips that you might want to keep in mind if you happen to get stuck, which happens pretty often. Okay, so lists are one of the backbones of most things that we'll be doing when trying to run statistics and trying to analyze and get summary statistics on a bunch of values. Then it's good to have those values stored in a list. Or when graphing anything like histograms, box plots, scatter plots, we typically want to have the data first set into a list. Okay, so that's the importance of lists, and they are used for other things as well, particularly if you want to manipulate a lot of data at the same time. So, for example, if we want to access lists, the lists are going to be in the Stat button. You see the blue list above it, but don't get thrown off by that. You do not need to access second stats. What you'll get instead is this screen with L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L6. This is if I need to use them on the main screen, but not if I need to use them or adjust what the list is itself. So don't hit second stat. Clear out of this. Well, we just want to hit stat itself. And we're going to have a few options here. All of these I'll talk about, except for 4, because that's not really necessary. But 1, 2, 3, and 5 are going to be important for manipulation of lists. Okay, so we go to Edit. Here we have our screen of lists. You should have list 1 all the way up to list 6. Depending on how big your screen is or the version of calculator, you might only see the first 3, but if you scroll over to the right, then you'll get more and more. You can add your own list, but generally 6 lists should do you just fine. Now, to put in numbers in a set or in a list here, say I'll go to list 2, and I'm on the bottom value with this list of 6 underscores. And this is where I'd put in my values. It even says down here L2 parentheses 1, indicating the first value in list 2. So I can start putting in values, say 6, enter, put 5.2 or 4.2 rather, enter, 8.1, enter. Hey, if I don't want to do a little math, maybe 5 plus 7. I know that's 12, but maybe I'm a little bit lazy. If I hit enter, it'll calculate that for us and put that value in the list. So that's pretty nice. It's pretty easy to put data into a list. You'll notice that I have data already in list 1. I'll be manipulating that in a moment. Now, if I have data in a list and I want to get rid of it, I could start at the top and start hitting delete or hitting clear and enter and doing that multiple times over, but it's pretty slow, particularly if you have tens of values here. The best way to do this is to go up so that your cursor is highlighted on L2 itself, or whatever list you're working with. Then you'll see in list notation 4.2, 8.1, 12, whatever values you have in your list. To get rid of those, I want to hit clear. And you'll notice the first time I hit clear, nothing has happened. The reason is that it has cleared L2 and now is asking for a prompt, but if I don't want to give it anything, I just press enter to say that I want you to be an empty list. So I hit clear, then enter, and the full list is depopulated. Everything is now gone, which is awesome. Makes it really good if I need to very quickly get rid of a list for any reason or another. Now, you don't necessarily need to do that. For example, maybe I messed up a value in my list. That 6 that I have up here was supposed to be a 7. I can go up to that 6 and just rewrite it specifically. Just type 7 over it and press enter. It has been rewritten. That way I don't need to clear the entire list if I make a singular mistake. The other useful thing about counting here, if you'll notice at number 9, it says L2 parentheses 6. That's saying that's my 6th value, which is particularly helpful if you know that you're supposed to have a certain amount of values there. And you can quickly check to say, oh, I forgot one. There was actually supposed to be 7 values. Which one did I forget about? Pretty useful tool there. So that's just looking at a list. However, when I mentioned clear, what happens very often is people accidentally hit delete instead. So let me show you what happens. Instead of hitting clear when I have L2 highlighted, look what happens if I hit delete. I hit delete, and the entire list is gone. It's deleted from view. I see L1, and then list 3, and then list 4, list 5. I can scroll over, but there's nothing there. It's just a blank space. L2 is permanently gone, or so you think. If this happens, which very often happens, all that has occurred is that it has disappeared from view. All the data that was in that list is still stored in the calculator's memory. We just need to tell the calculator that I want to see it. The way to do that, I hit stat, which is where I access the list in the first place. And the fifth option down here, setup editor, this sets up the list of values for me, or the list themselves. I go down to setup editor, which will be a program, so I'll go to the main screen, and I just need to hit enter one more time to run it, and it will say that it is done. When that occurs, I go back to my list, so I hit stat, go to edit, and voila, list 2 has returned with all of its values intact, which is really handy if you accidentally hit things. And now if I need to clear it, I can go to L2, hit clear, and press enter. And it's all the data is gone. But the list itself is intact. So those are some common pitfalls. Now I have list 1, and I'm going to want to do a few things to this list 1. For example, if I went to stat, I saw sort A and sort D. What this does is that it sorts a list ascending order and it sorts a list descending order. So for example, if I go to sort A, it'll bring it back to the home page, and I need to tell it what list I want it to sort. My stuff is in list 1, so I'm going to tell it L1, and I access that by hitting second, which is the blue button for me, and I hit the number 1. If you see above the number 1, I have L1 in small lettering. That way, if I hit second, I access the letters above. Similar to how you hit shift on a keyboard to access the values above the numbers. For example, the exclamation point is above the number 1, and you access that by hitting shift. So I hit sort A, L1, and I close parentheses just to be a good mathematician. Then I hit enter. It says it's done. But what has it done? I go to stat, check my list out, and I see that my list has been put into nice ascending order. Incredibly useful if you make a random set of data, which this is, and you need to find something like a mode, the most repeated value. This way I can scroll through pretty easily and say, okay, well there's 2 1s, okay, there's 3 2s, so that's the most repeated so far. And then I see at least 5 4s, that's the most repeated. It makes it pretty easy so I don't need to keep a separate tally. Sort descending would do the same thing, it would just reverse it. So the top values at the beginning would be the 15s, and it would descend down to 1. Okay, now that's some list manipulation. Now for the big thing that you can do. If I'm dealing with frequency data, what I very commonly have to do is take what is called a relative frequency, which means I need to take the frequency data and divide it by the total amount. That's a common circumstance. Or if I'm trying to calculate standard deviation by hand, poor child, if I'm trying to calculate standard deviation by hand, that means I need to do a lot of steps, and that indicates I need to do a lot of things to each value in the data set. Instead of trying to do that by hand, doing each of these one at a time in the main screen of the calculator, I can do it all at once using a list. For example, say I want to take list 1, and I want to divide every number in that list by 2, effectively cutting the values of the list in half. Okay, well, I want to go over here to list 2, and you'll see that I have L2 itself highlighted, not one of the lines below it. I have L2, so it just says L2 equals, and I wanted to take the entire set from L1 and divide it by 2. So again, I hit second, 1, so that L1 shows here on the cursor, and then division sign 2. This will take each individual value from list 1, divide it by 2, and will populate all of that data into list 2. If this works correctly, I should have 0.5, 0.5, 1, 1, 1, 1.5, etc., etc. Just like when I was clearing it, once I have this in, I have to hit enter for it to take, and there we go. It did it really quickly. It divided every single value, all 35 pieces of data that I have, by 2. And that's pretty great. You can do a lot of things to this, and it doesn't even need to be next to the list. Maybe I want to take list 1 again and add 7. I'm in L3, let's do L1 plus 7. Doesn't matter if I'm not in the list that's right next to it. L1 plus 7, press enter, done. Look at that. I have all my values added by 7. That's pretty cool. You can adjust one list and do any simple operations. You can square them. You can do any of the order of operations, the multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. You can put them in parentheses. You could do a lot of things. You can even take logs. You could do a lot of mathematical operations. Even further, you can take 2 lists and manipulate both of them together. For example, what if I want to take every value from list 1, or let's say every value from list 2, and multiply it by every value in list 3? Let's try that. List 2 times list 3. This will take each pairing, so it should be 0.5 times 8 should give me 4. 0.5 times 8 should give me 4. 1 times 9 should give me 9. And there we go. Look at that. It took each value from each of these pairs and multiplied them straight over. That's pretty cool. You can do a lot of stuff with lists and save yourself a good amount of time. This is something you want to keep in mind for if you have a lot of data that you need to manipulate all at once, because you have this option available to you. Accessing and manipulating lists can help save you 15, 20 minutes of time just calculating small numbers together. Great, so we have all this. Again, we can clear out any of the lists that we need and just get back down to my original list and work with it as I need. Lists are pretty great. The ascending and descending that I had done earlier, I had put this list into ascending order. When I do some summary statistics later, it's not necessary. It's okay, but it's not something that you have to do, which is pretty cool. The calculator knows how to take a list and say it's trying to find a median. It'll do it by itself. It'll put it in order and find the middle value without prompting you to put it in order first, which is pretty good. Lists are great in TI calculators, and you should definitely know how to use them appropriately. With that said, that's everything that I wanted to talk about today for lists. If you have any questions, please feel free to put the questions in the video comment section down below, and I'll see what I can do to comment. If you're one of my students, please just come up and ask me a question. I'll see what I can do to help. Other than that, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.